I know some people are still getting their cake, but I think we want to go ahead and start the formal evening's events. First of all, let me recognize some of the attendees tonight. Our Chancellor, Michelle Johnson, is here. Our presidents, our new president, Jean Hernandez, and Denise Yoakum. And also, we think we have some distinguished faculty, former distinguished faculty. If you would stand, please. Brian in the corner. All right, it's my honor tonight on behalf of the foundation to present Beth with her check that she receives for being the distinguished faculty. Come on up. Welcome.
And I just want to say that I'm actually giving it back because we've been trying to raise money for the emergency funds for the students, and it just seems never a quarter goes by that a student doesn't need something. And so I know the foundation's been doing a lot trying to get that. So if anybody feels like it, you can always go, I think, online and donate. But anyway, they're trying to do a lot of stuff.
So introducing Beth tonight is the esteemed Ted Wood. Ted will come on up.
His bow tie. Yeah. I don't want to be esteemed. Okay, so here's my Beth Norman story. I was chair of the search committee when we hired Beth. Yep, we go back to the beginning. I'm to blame, or what to think. And at the time, I had a student in my organic class called Roberta Armstrong. I'm sure you remember Roberta. Excellent student, quite a character. Anyway, we sent out the job announcement, and shortly thereafter, Roberta comes bursting into my office saying, "You gotta hire Storm and Norman." I'm like, "Who?" She goes, "Storm and Norman. I just found out she applied for the geology position here. I was in her class last year at South Puget Sound. She's great. You gotta hire her." So I'm like, okay. I'm intimidated. So we send out the job announcement, or we read the applications. And Beth was an obvious candidate that we all wanted to interview. So we invite her in, and I'm expecting this big, hulking behemoth of a woman. Couldn't fit through the door, had to bust down the walls, chomping over the desk to get up to the front. And instead in walks Beth. And I'm like, what the? On what planet is she storming? Munchkin Land? Was that too non-PC? Anyway, so we start the interview, and I start to feel a little breeze on the back of my neck. And a little while later, the wind picks up. Shortly thereafter, papers are flying around the room. We get into the teaching segment, and lightning bolts are flashing across. The thunder is rumbling, tornadoes forming in the corners. By the time it was done, we all knew that we had just experienced a true force of nature. And that enthusiasm and energy and passion we saw that day wasn't just Beth on interview day. That's Beth every day. Everything she does. I'm sitting out in the hall, she's inside teaching her class, and the passion is just oozing out. She even somehow finds passion for her role as union president. Not sure how that works. That can be a thankless job. It can be an underappreciated job. It's one of those things where if things happen that faculty don't like, you often hear about it. If things happen that are good, you often don't hear about it. Well, here's one faculty member that's been given a microphone and wants to say tonight loudly and clearly, I greatly appreciate everything Beth has done for us in her role as union president. We're a stronger faculty and therefore a better college as a result of Beth's efforts. What was I going to say next? I think I'm done. With that, why don't you join me? Hold on to your hats.
Teddy, isn't there something underneath the...
Well, that comes after I bring her up here, honey.
Oh, okay.
I can't get away from that even here. I love you too, baby. So hold on to your hats, and please welcome a woman I'm very proud to call my colleague, even prouder to call my friend, your distinguished faculty, Beth Norman. And of course, we got gifts for Beth. What do you get for a geologist?
A rock!
A rock! Of course that's what you get. Not one of those pretty rocks that are sitting at the center of these tables. Not one of those silly rocks that some of you have in earrings and necklaces and whatnot. I got her one of those rocks you go out in front of the Rainier building and pick up off the ground. I even wiped off most of the dirt. Not that a geologist cares about dirt. So here's a rock.
Looks like a potato. Oh.
Okay, we also got her something else.
I need the sledgehammer.
You know what's in here?
Rocks?
A rock.
What?
It's a rock.
Really?
Right.
Let's see how heavy it is.
It's a heavy rock.
That's not heavy enough.
Excuse me.
Do I get to open it now?
The main thing you need to know about this rock, Beth, is that Linda picked it out.
The social director.
So you can trust that it's pretty cool.
Well, let's see. I already crowded up my table over here with stuff.
You can open it right here or whatever.
Well, we might want to know what's in here.
But don't rip anything.
Now you gotta save it for later. Repackaging.
Well, this is not a. Oh my God! It is a rock. Wow.
And wait a second. That's only half the coolness. It comes with a couple of lights that you can put inside,
Oh, you mean it like?
and it glows.
Oh, there's a hole in it.
We've got a
Wait,
battery-powered
it's
one.
defective. It's got a hole in it.
Here's a little battery power. It's not very powerful, but It'll give you a feel.
Well, we might have to turn the light
Yeah, I
off.
don't think you can see that.
Wow. And it's my birthstone.
There you go. And then, of course, rock candy.
That's the light bulb. Don't want to break that.
Oh, so you just want to shove it back over here?
Thank you.
Oh, wait, it did it. That's okay. My name is Beth, and I'm a bookaholic. I was looking for a Bookaholics Anonymous meeting, and all I can find are book clubs. As you can see, there's a few books in our house. I, was feeling a little anxious about this last weekend, and I was really trying not to binge read, but I fell off the bookshelf, and I downed an entire book in 10 hours. So I started putting my slideshow together at like 6 p.m. My daughter, realizing what a bookaholic I am, she actually gave me 3 books for Christmas. I have not read them yet because she told me if I started reading them, I would not put them down till I was finished, all 3. And the quarter was starting, and so I have tried to be really good. It's really, really hard. You know how it is when you're a bookaholic. It's really hard to resist, a good book. In fact, I probably would have had my master's thesis done at least 6 months sooner, except somebody was reading a Robert Ludlum, Maury's Circle, and I started reading that, and then I started asking everybody for more, and then one day Dave came home, and a book popped out from underneath me because I was supposed to be writing my thesis, and instead I heard him coming, and I quickly sat on the book, and it just flew out. And, I'm such a bookaholic that when he comes home, I still hide books. Even though there's no real reason, I can't help myself. I just stick it under like the couch pillow or something like that, So I was kind of desperate to read even before I started kindergarten, and I knew, that whole nerdy thing, you kind of sometimes don't know the whole social norm stuff, and so one of my problems is being kind of a show-off. And I knew the alphabet better than the little girl next door, but she was a little older than me, and she got to go to kindergarten, and I didn't. And I remember being at the big picture window just really upset that these other kids were going to school to learn to read, and I didn't get to go. So I tried to talk my mom into teaching me to read. So she didn't teach me phonetics, but she did teach me a few words, and I'm pretty sure that this is a page out of the book, because I remember cat. And I could do ABC. I knew my alphabet, and I could recognize the letters. I just didn't realize you could sound out words. And I don't know, like some of your real strong memories. Like one of my first ones is in kindergarten, the day the teacher was drawing and she didn't go in order. So I don't want you to think it took me to pee to figure out that that the letters of the alphabet had sounds that went with the words that were like in the books. She did them out of order, but I remember the P. She was an excellent drawer, and there was a pillow and a pumpkin and all these things that began with P, and it's like pillow, pumpkin. I'm thinking, oh my God, the letters go with the words, and the letters go with the sounds, and you can actually sound words out. I was so excited. I've never forgotten that day. Like, this is a highlight of my life. I learned to read. You can see some other things here. The Girl Scout badge, I wasn't really into the whole social thing. I didn't really quite understand the whole girl social friend thing. It did not really make sense to me. And I did go to Girl Scouts for 1 year, but we didn't really have a sleeping bag, and I wasn't going to go on a camping trip because all the other kids were talking about their sleeping bags and stuff, so I never did any camping trips. So that's the book, the badge that I got. I did the book badge. Yes, that's the only one. I did, see that my girls, I ended up becoming a Girl Scout leader so that my girls could have that socialization outside of school. It's the Encyclopedia Britannica. Yeah, well, we saved a bunch of money before we went to graduate school, and we left with almost exactly the amount of money we started, except for $1,000. That was for the encyclopedia set. We did work the whole time, so that's why it kind of came out even. But no, that was the encyclopedia set. We'll hear a little bit more about, what happened with that. The setup here is science encyclopedia, so, along the way, we did become pretty nerdy. And Carol, my sister Carol here, we actually, they talk about hydrogen fuel and all that kind of stuff. And students will keep coming in going, we should have hydrogen cars in my class. And I go, well, where are you going to get the electricity to get the hydrogen out of the water? It's stuck onto oxygen. There isn't just hydrogen floating around. You can't just gather it up and stick it in your car. Well, there's a bunch of experiments in that book. And Carol and I used to go through that book and actually do experiments in our room. And, Mom was really nervous about giving us a glass dish and batteries and wires and jars, because we did separate the hydrogen from the oxygen in our bedroom and did the little test, you put the match in the oxygen one and it burns, and you put it in the hydrogen one and it goes out. Yeah, we did that in our bedroom, so yeah. And I now have the books. I, took them from the house. I didn't even think I asked my sisters. I just...
Okay. Yeah, they're all yours.
So... Yes, so I am. I have to say that before I became a science nerd, I was definitely a book nerd. And as when I was talking to Carol about this, she actually reminded me that in grade school I said I was going to start at the A's in a library and just read all the way through. And I have to admit that I spent a lot of time in the library when everybody else was outside playing. And one day they passed a rule that you had to be outside on nice days. And I was a little upset because I was pretty much the only kid in the library on a nice day. So, yes, that's the beginning of the nerdiness. So, this is the evolution of a nerd, right? How we go from being a science nerd to actually trying to get away from being a total nerd. So you'll see how that kind of happens. But just if my two sisters could stand up, I'll point them out, and their lovely images up here. So I am the oldest. And one of the reasons is I like dressing up even when it's not necessarily the appropriate,
Oh, we
you
have
know.
to stay standing? Or can we sit down?
Whatever.
Or we have to
So
stand there under our
Michelle's the youngest. And Carol actually looks like the nerd in this picture, although we were both pretty equal. We were both pretty equal in that regard. But I did have a thing about, yes, we camped our way all the way across the country and back, and I had fun wearing a skirt. But the thing about this too is that you're going to see there's a little foreshadowing here. So one of the things that I feel eternally grateful for, that I really feel bad about our students, that so many that come to us don't know what they want to do. Like they don't, so we're talking about having pathways and career pathways. We got to figure out how to get students on a career pathway. Occasionally you get a student like me that had an interest that started way back in grade school, and it kind of carried right on through. So I consider myself extremely lucky when I see those students coming in that I had something to follow, like I wasn't lost and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I mean, I didn't know exactly, but you'll see that there's a lot of foreshadowing going on here. So this happens to be Lake Louise, glacially carved valley. That the end of the glacier, you end up with a mound of sediment that's referred to as a moraine. So this is actually Lake Louise in Canada. Lake Moraine, it turned out, is dammed by a landslide. So Lake Moraine is not a moraine dammed lake, it's a landslide dammed lake. This happens to be from Iceland, and I'm standing on a moraine with the moraine dammed lake behind it, and volcanic, it's Iceland, it's got a lot of volcano stuff. So, I haven't gone very far from where I was when I was like 11. It gets worse. So, just to see how badly nerdy I am, Yeah, I sent away for this when I was 10. I still have this. This is a set of, let's see, there's 4 fossils on here. I didn't actually ask my parents. Sometimes you find a dime on the sidewalk or something like that. I think it was probably all of, 15 or 25 cents. Probably the back of a comic book. I remember taping the coins carefully down, figuring out what our address was, because of course you had to put your address down. And I sent away for fossils when I was 10. I mean, I still have fossils, right? I've got fossil magnets, I got fossil jewelry, I got fossils all over my classroom. This is not a big surprise here. But then, this is what I sent for. I wanted there's a chunk of dinosaur bone, there's a sea urchin, there's a horned coral, there's a shark's tooth. I mean, there's some pretty old stuff on here. But then the books started showing up. And then another book showed up. And bills started showing up. I didn't realize I had joined the Audubon Society nature program. And by the time the second bill showed up, I had to go tell somebody that, because this one here, we're already past due by $1.15, and the next $1.15 has shown up, and now what am I going to do? And, Mom didn't even have a checking account, and you didn't ask Dad stuff like this. I mean, he was scary. So I had to go tell Mom, and Mom's like, well, what's the matter with you? I don't even have a check. I can't do that. We're going to go have to ask Dad. Dad's going to have to write a check and cancel this and blah, blah, blah. So, I felt a little bad about it. So the stickers are actually still, those are the days where you put the stickers and you stick them. Yeah, the stickers are still in the middle. But isn't it, it's kind of prophetic, right? Prehistoric life. I teach oceanography. I teach geology. We went to Iceland, practically in the Arctic. So this is just compounded now because it was also the science book in the 5th grade. There was a chapter. I remember the chapter. I can see the chapter in my mind. There's a sentence about halfway down the page that says there's these forces in the earth that push the mountains up. What forces? There's gravity, right? Gravity makes things fall down. What forces are going to push things back up? Really? So I went up and asked the nun. At that time you think the nuns know everything, right? So you go up and ask the nun, I say, well, what are these forces in the earth that push the mountains up? And she just looked at me and she goes, I can't remember but it was obvious she didn't know, which is a great shock to me. It's like, how could you not know? You're the teacher, right? This is the science book. You're teaching me science. How could you not know? So anyway, and we drove across the country that year from Portland to Pennsylvania. We took a little detour. We went from Portland to Pennsylvania by way of the Grand Canyon, then Niagara Falls after we visited the relatives in Pennsylvania. And it was quite a shock because even then, geography, they talked about how, Daniel Boone had to get over the Appalachians. Well, we had just driven over the Cascades. We drove over the Rockies, and then we got to the Appalachians. I asked my cousins, well, where's the mountains? And they're going, well, you're in them. And I'm thinking, this stopped Daniel Boone? This stopped all these colonists from getting to the other side? I said, but these are hills. They were quite insulted. I did not make any, like I said, I had trouble socially. I didn't make any friends with those cousins. You can see that, yeah, that's me in the middle over there, not looking so good. We came back through the Canadian Rockies, and that's where we went through Lake Louise. We went through Calgary, another little prophetic thing. We went through Calgary. We were there during the Stampede. It was kind of fun being in the parking lot because it turned out it was a Stampede. There's no place to even put a camper. And so we were at the gas station and some man said, well, I'm going to go, I've got horses, I'm going to the grounds where, the cowboys and stuff are. He goes, just follow me in and just don't say anything, right? So we ended up pulling our trailer in where all of the cowboys had all their horses and all that kind of stuff. So that's where we ended up camping in Calgary. We ended up moving to Calgary later and living there for 4 years. So it's, what?
They didn't move to Calgary. We didn't.
No, my husband and I moved to Calgary because it was a bit of a depression when we kind of got out of graduate school and there weren't a lot of jobs in the U.S., so we went to Canada. We emigrated. We were immigrants. This picture down here is from afterwards. Now we have a camper. Well, it was one of those pop-up things, you know. And we also had, at that point, Dad actually bought sleeping bags. Again, maybe you shouldn't be too surprised. I still have my sleeping bag and I still use it. I was very jealous of that young man in the picture because at this point we're kind of middle school, and it turns out they teach earth science in middle school in California, and we didn't in Oregon. And so he was like going around picking up obsidian, and some of you people actually have maybe obsidian on your tables, but he was like identifying rocks and talking about the lava flows, and I was upset that we didn't have earth science in middle school and like other states did. So you can see this is an ongoing thing here on my mind here. Now, this one shouldn't be too surprising either, actually. And the cool thing about this is this has opportunity cards. What's our motto, right? We create opportunities for students. Well, this is an opportunity game. In fact, I think we should just skip the career pathway stuff, and we should just have our students play careers when they get here and see which path they choose, right? Well, it should not surprise you too much. I took a look at the board, and we spent, I'm pretty sure it was 5th grade. I was in the 5th grade, and it was a pretty rainy year, and so Mom usually didn't let us have friends in the house, the neighbor kids. But this time, we had gotten this for Christmas, and we spent all of Christmas break, we spent all of spring break with various neighbor kids coming over, playing this game nonstop. Hours and hours. And I'll tell you where I went. College, because it turns out you actually get, it's actually kind of an interesting, you actually get to choose, you have to choose 60 points, and it's made out of happiness points, love goes with happiness, happiness points, fame points, and dollar points, money points. And it turns out that if you go prospecting for, most of the stuff on here is worth $5,000. If you land on the uranium, go prospecting for uranium in Peru, it's $20,000. If you go to the moon, it's $10,000 if you land on the gold dust one. But to get to the moon or to get to the prospecting in Peru, you have to go to college and be a scientist. Or if you want to go to the moon, you got to go to college and be an engineer. So I usually chose the route of going, this 5th grade, I'm choosing the route to go to college. My parents hadn't gone to college. None of my 5 older brothers and sisters had ever gone to college. Nobody in our family had gone to college. I didn't know anybody who'd gone to college. Well, maybe those nuns did. But I chose the college route, and I went prospecting for uranium. That was usually my choice of the career path that I was going to take when I played this game. Okay, so now a little bit more serious. So, is it a fixed mindset or is it a growth mindset? Right? We've had this talk at this college. Is it a fixed mindset or a growth mindset? I'll tell you where I was. I was definitely fixed. Well, not quite that way, but I was definitely fixed mindset. Right? I thought that those other kids that were out there playing on the playground, the ones that could hit the ball, the ones that could catch the ball, I could do hopscotch. But those ones that could catch and hit the ball, I thought that they just had natural athletic ability. And I didn't. I couldn't catch the ball. And that social thing, I didn't quite get the social thing either. No, seriously. When I was in college, I dated this guy for an entire year. And my sister asked me, she goes, well, what color are his eyes? And I went, I don't know. I had not actually looked him right in the... Granted, he was almost 6 feet and I'm only like 5 feet, so it's kind of hard, you get a stiff neck. But really, I kissed him. You'd think I would have seen something, but I didn't. And then it dawned on me that I really didn't look people in... I had to learn. It didn't occur to me that people looked at people in the eye. It wasn't a thing. I don't know. I had to learn to do that. And I want to say that, I had a wonderful family, and so I just want to introduce give a chance. So my sister Carol, and her husband Dennis, and 2 of their boys, men, Andrew and Nathan, and Nathan's lovely wife Christina, who both went to Western and got geology degrees, by the way. My daughter, Sarah, who's going to help me out here in a minute. My husband, Dave. My sister, Michelle. My poor sister, Michelle. You know, because when you get teased in... When you get teased in grade school, you know, sometimes you need somebody to take it out on. Well, the youngest one in the family usually ends up...
That's why?
That's why.
I finally know.
Now you know.
I know.
If you notice in that first picture, she had kind of the blonder hair and Carol and mine are kind of dark. Yeah, we told her she was adopted.
For years and years and years.
So the social part, it took me a lot longer to get to figuring out the social part. In fact, it probably was until I really got here that I started really figuring it out. And one of the people that really helped me was actually Mary Beth Balo. Because I avoided the playground, right? I got to high school, I avoided the cafeteria. I spent the first 2 years in the Math Science Resource Center, big surprise there, with a bunch of nerdy boys that we never spoke to each other. I eventually did kind of get involved in, you know, like they'd say, well, why don't you run for, you're good at math, you be the treasurer. So I did end up being treasurer of all kinds of things. But the academic part, after 5th grade, the academic part got easier, because before that, the math part, before that it was arithmetic, and you had to memorize the multiplication tables, and you had to do it quickly. Well, quickly was not my thing. Quickly's still not my thing. And so I never really passed the multiplication tables, because I can certainly figure it out. Like I know that, you know, like 8 times 10 is 80, and if you subtract 8, you get 72, and that's going to be 9 times 8. Yeah, well, you can't do that while you're trying to recite the multiplication table. So I pretty much flunked every long division test because I'm like figuring this out in my head. And the nun literally asked me, is somebody doing your homework for you? Because you're getting 100s on your homework, but you're flunking all your tests. And I remember thinking, is this nun, this is actually the same nun that didn't know how the mountains were formed. And I remember thinking, is this nun stupid? If she'd looked at my test, she would have seen that I had 100. Every single problem I did was completely correct. I never made a mistake. I just only got through half of them. And then we got to story problems. Well, they give them all kinds of time to figure out a story problem. That was the easy part. So after that, no problem. By the time I was in 8th grade, it was like I just was getting bored and I wanted to do the next chapter and the next chapter. And the teacher finally just said, well, if you want to go on, you got to do every problem in the book. So I did every problem in the book. I didn't have a social life. So the academic thing was working pretty well. The social thing wasn't working so well. The physical part, you know, that whole athletic thing was not working out so well. I do want to also introduce my guild ladies from church, because this is the place where I actually had to figure out how to interact with a group of women. I'm serious. See, they're all friends now, but when I first got there, I really didn't know how to behave around women. I really didn't know what to do with myself. And they have taught me how to be friends with women. I mean, like I said, it took me a while, but I finally got there, right? So just because I want you guys to feel a little bit about how I felt in grade school, like what it's like to be a nerd, when they did a reflex test, and I didn't get the rulers on the table, but what they did was they dropped a ruler and you had to try to grab it. And there was a boy in the class that, you know, kind of grabbed it, you know, around 2 or 3. Yeah, well, their kid who had me was complaining. They go, well, she didn't even catch the ruler. So the teacher had a hard time believing that somebody couldn't even catch the ruler. So they made me come up in the front of the class and do it in front of everybody. By the time I got to PE, the PE teacher pulled out money and said, well, in front of the whole PE class, well, if you can catch this, you can keep it. So that's why there's money on the table. So you guys are going to do that right now. So Sarah. No, you got to get that money out. There's like $4, so that means for every 2 people, there's a pair.
And if you don't catch it, then it stays here. If you do catch it, there's $1 for each 2 people, right? So the person who catches it the lowest gets to keep it. If you don't catch it, then I get to keep it.
Am I dropping it for you?
Yeah, so you gotta... Wait, we haven't seen mine yet, so don't laugh. I might drop it too. I am her child after all. All right, let's see. I'm only half her child. So while you're trying that out, Dave, don't cheat. Your fingers weren't all the way at the bottom. No, your fingers at the bottom. Like, what? Did you catch it? It's harder than it looks. So, what? What? What do you say?
He said that in defense of me, I'm more related to him than you.
So just so you know, that whole physical thing didn't work out very well in high school either. My only C was in typing. And in fact, my dean here, he made me put it on my professional development plan because, we really didn't have personal computers. I managed to find somebody to type every single essay I ever had to write. Boyfriend, sister, somebody. My thesis, yeah, Dave, my husband typed my thesis for me. I offered to do a bunch of his math calculations because at that time, again, you couldn't just stick it in the computer and put the program in. You had to do them all by hand. So I like crunching numbers. So I crunched the numbers, he did the typing. So yeah, no, I had to actually figure out how to type. I'm a little bit faster than I used to be, so I think I'm above 30 words per minute, but not by much. So basically, right, so I started off with this fixed mindset, right? I could do the academic stuff, so that was never a problem. But it was the social part and the physical part that were an issue. So I kind of saw safety in numbers. So remember I had that first started off in the Math Science Resource Center. But notice in high school now, there are other students who actually are interested in studying and like academic related things. And I don't know if anybody knows Dan Martinez, but he teaches for us. He's right here. And if anybody's ever drank Widmer beer, there's Rob Widmer right there when he has hair. He's done commercials where he's lost, he's bald in the commercials. Yeah, there he is with hair. And it wasn't just, it was musical. I'm kind of like behind in the whole musical thing too. And like Rob and some of the other boys on there were in the band. They actually decided that I needed to be introduced to music. So they decided to start with the 1812 Overture because it had things like cannons and they thought maybe I could relate to that. We actually had a Jeopardy kind of thing in our school, and most of these are seniors. There's 2 of us. Richard here was our only National Merit Scholar, and so it was like a Jeopardy team, and so we were the team for that year. So again, I found other nerds to hang out with. My dad actually went about 5th grade or so. My dad actually bought an entire library from Morningside Hospital, so we actually had our own library in the basement. And we used to check out books to the neighbor kids. Around about my senior year, the resource center lady, the geography resource center, social sciences resource center, decided that, there was always a certain type of girls that went out for cheerleading, and she decided that it should have more diversity. So she told me that, I was loud, and I generally talked a lot. Yeah, motor mouth was not uncommonly used with my name. And so anyway, she convinced me I needed to go out for cheerleading. Again, not musically inclined, not really into the whole physical thing. Well, you had to try it in front of the entire school. So it wasn't really a popularity contest. It was how well you could do the routine. And the other girls I tried out with really, really, really wanted to make the team. They wanted to be cheerleaders really bad. So one of them came over my house and basically tutored me for hours so that I could learn the routine that all of them had picked up in like this. And yeah, no, they came over and practiced with me so that the four of us actually did a good job and all four of us made it onto the cheerleading squad. But yes, no, I had to be specially tutored in order to be able to get there. So I decided that, maybe you could learn some of this stuff. And I decided my girls weren't going to start out disadvantaged like I was, because I've never been part of a sports team in my life. So I did end up coaching soccer, even though I've never ever played soccer in a soccer team. The only soccer I've ever played was when we were getting trained to be soccer coaches. And it just so happened that the soccer coach, trainer person, if anybody follows soccer, Casey Keller was a goalie and on the U.S. team. Well, his stepdad, who raised him, was my soccer teacher. And he would have to go off and do clinics for the women's national team. And then he'd have to come back and say, okay, I want you to, I want you to teach the girls to run down the field and they get stuck in the corner. They got to be able to kick the ball around like this. And I kept saying, I don't get it. I can't figure out what you're doing. And I said, could you do it slower? So then he'd go like this and he'd go, and I go, I still don't get it. So he actually had to come over and go like this. Turn your hips. But the girls all participated in soccer all through high school. Sarah still participates in soccer. So, and the same thing, we enrolled them in music. We got them in some dance, Girl Scouts. So we tried to get them so that they weren't, like a nerdy, can't do it kind of person. And I had to learn, right? I had to go from that fixed mindset to the growth mindset, right? Because I had to decide that I could learn to do some of this stuff. And Mom always said practice makes perfect, but I never practiced. I practiced reading a lot, but I did not practice any sports. So now we're getting to the adventures of a science nerd, because, they're going to pay me to do this. So field camp, you notice there's a lot of guys. There was actually 6 girls there, but not a lot of girls. And yeah, I'm in front because I always wanted to know what was going on. And when you're short, you're not going to stand in the back if you actually want to see what's going on. First job was, and remember, what was it that I wanted to find when I went in that career path? Uranium. Here I am at the Satsuph nuclear power plant site. I worked for a company that was doing the slope stability when they were building the plant that was going to burn uranium. Well, you don't burn it, but was going to use it as fuel. Well, it never did get finished. Whoops. Aptly named, I would say. And then, guess what my second job was? Looking for uranium for Exxon Minerals. So there I am, and actually, because the reason I really wanted to get dressed up, that whole wearing a dress when you're going across the country, yeah, well, I've got a picture of me sitting on the back of the truck in a dress, too. I used to, go to geology class with my belt on and my dress and my hammer tucked in my belt, just because. It didn't bother me. I kind of, your hand lands around your neck. I did not have a pocket protector because I'm a girl and we don't wear those shirts with the pockets that you need a protector for. Although I must say that, I did a senior thesis, and I think I was the only one that year. So I got the award, at the end of the year for the bachelor's for the best science student or whatever. And so the award was $100, and they basically said, well, a lot of you have already bought hand lenses and brought in compasses, and so instead of giving you one of those, we're going to give you the $100 and you could buy what you think you need. Guess what I told them? I'm going to go buy a sewing machine. They weren't impressed. So women in STEM, right? So notice here's, I started high school in 70, 71, but look at those percentages of women that get bachelor's degrees in 70, 71 when I was starting high school, and, kind of thinking about math and science and knowing that I wasn't going to ever be a waitress because I was just going to drop everything and spill everything, and that was not going to work out. And, Mom said, well, girls, they become secretaries and stuff. And I went, Mom, I'm not typing, no. So what can I do? I can't type. I can't carry things. What am I going to do? I guess I'll have to study science or math. But look at these percent. And I did go in and look up, what are recent numbers? And it turns out the numbers now are not so different. The percentages are not so different from 2000, but there's a huge difference between 1970, 71 and 2000. And then you can also tell there's kind of a drop-off between bachelor's, master's, and doctorates. So there's this, what we call a leaky pipeline for women in STEM. But notice, of course, there's that biology thing, you biologists out there. Notice the women in biology and the health sciences, of course. And the one that really surprised me was the math. The math percentages, they're pretty high. My sister Carol went into math. So I did go to graduate school, did study geology, did a master's degree in the Klamath Mountains. So you can hear a little bit more really fast here about, the Klamath Mountains. But that's my dad. So I spent 2 months when I went to graduate school. It was kind of like, I was working for a coal company, and they said, we'll hire you the next summer. We'll pay all this stuff for you to do your master's thesis. But I was going to have to sit around and count sand grains in a microscope after working for them for the summer. And then somebody comes along, and actually my husband goes, I think my wife would like doing that kind of stuff. Oh, I guess I should, you've probably heard this, some of you have heard this story before, but yeah, the very first words he ever said to me, "You in the front, shut up." I actually kind of had a list, and on that careers game, if you go to college, the very first spot is fall in love. Yeah, well, I was kind of looking around the class going, are there any eligible young men in here? He was not on my list. We went on a first date because he asked me to go cross-country skiing, and I said, well, who else is going? Because I figured Todd and Leon, his buddies, were going. No, they're not going. Well, what about Virginia or Barb? And no, they're not going. I go, well, who's going? Well, you and me. And I went, oh, well, I really want to go skiing. So I went, and I had fun, and it's been fun ever since. However, he was doing his own field work, and so, I was going to be out in the woods for 2 months. I took my dad. So he actually spent 2 months in the woods with me, carrying half the rocks. I carried the other half. My official field assistant got to carry the camera because she couldn't keep up with us. But anyway, he wanted a picture holding the rock up. He's 65. When I took him out there, and he had to hike up and down thousands of feet a day, carry a pack full of rocks. Yeah, and none of us could keep up with him. And that is me over there. That's what happens to you when you spend 2 months hiking all day in the sun. So just a little bit, there's got to be a little geology in here. And this is kind of why I went to Cuba and asked the college to let me spend my professional development funds to go to Cuba. Because I did my master's thesis in the Klamath, and we did put some serpentinite on everybody's table. It's the green, black, and shiny rock. I love slick rock. It causes landslides, which was making California nervous. But this area had never been mapped. So the geology had never been mapped. It was probably the last area in the United States that wasn't in Alaska or on a mountaintop that had not been mapped yet. So I was pretty excited to do what I thought was real geology. So spent the summer doing the mapping out here. And so I just noticed the cross-section. And some of you have, like this on your table. You have a variety of things on your table. Of course, hammers and hand lenses and rocks and, fossils and corals and ocean things. But basically, there's been subduction going on our shoreline along this coastline for a long time. And this is like Jurassic Age subduction and volcanoes going off. Like over 100 million years ago, the rock I was standing on with the hammer is 144 million years, and most of the other rocks in this area are then older than that, right? Because that igneous rock goes through it and heats and bakes the other stuff. So this kind of stuff's been going on for a long time on this shoreline, and notice how it causes all that folding and crunching and things stacking up on each other. Well, I know, we got to go to the next one. I forget that the little mini one here is actually not up there, it's up here. But anyway, so Cuba and the Klamath, is there a connection? Well, there are some people who think that there's been huge strike-slip faults like the San Andreas that have been operating for a long time along the shoreline, that it kind of alternates between subduction and sliding past each other, so that things from Cuba, clear down here, can end up clear up there after hundreds of millions of years. So when I heard there was ophiolites, which there is in the Klamath, a really cool ophiolite, it's basically seafloor that gets shoved up on the continent, which is kind of hard to explain. for geologists, not just anybody. But it always involves a lot of serpentinite when that kind of stuff happens, and in the Klamath, they were having trouble with, the roads and landslides and all that kind of stuff. Someday you should ask me about the serpentinite and the bear that may have been there. And maybe it wasn't, I don't know. I just got scared and it was slippery rock and I wasn't going. So air photos, you can do things on air photos if you're afraid to actually go out there where the rocks really are. So I did get to go to Cuba, and we had a geologist from Cuba that led our trip. So this is kind of showing the geology of Cuba area. And basically, North America's coming this way, South America's coming this way, the Nazca Plate and Cocos Plate is coming this way. So you got subduction on this side, you got subduction over there creating, volcanoes in the Caribbean with coral all around them and all that stuff. And Cuba, and if you remember the Haitian earthquake, is on this strike-slip fault where North America is trying to go past it, and the Cuban plate doesn't know what to do, right? Because this is going this way, and this is going this way, and that's subducting over there, and this is subducting over here, and it's just stuck in the middle, getting actually squished and rotated. But weird things happen, like there's a little bit of spreading there where this thing's going on. That little thing, there's actually a little spreading back there, and that's the kind of stuff that actually ends up on the edge of the continent at times when you start smashing things together. So if you were paying attention to the cross-section from my thesis area that I drew, that's Cuba. Notice all the stacking of the layers of rocks. This is what was going on in Cuba at about the same time, about 150, 200 million years ago. So this is just showing you've got the Caribbean terrain is like all the corally, limestoney stuff. And then you've got the ultramafic rocks, which is basically the serpentinites. And then you've got the volcanic arc rocks, which is basically what the Cascades are. This was our group. Notice there was quite a few women, and the cool thing about this is it was a lot of women who were working in geology in business, not academic. And so it was really cool to go on a trip with professional women in geology who've been doing it for, as you can see, quite a long time, some of them. And just to hear how it was to have a whole career in industry as opposed to having a career in an academic setting. But this is just showing, here's a what we call pillow basalt. So if the basalt erupts under the sea, which seafloor stuff can do that, you get this pillow shape. Well, the one over here is from Cuba. The one over there is out of the Klamath Mountains. And the blocks up there was basically serpentinite that was being mined in Cuba and used for building stone. So again, I was seeing a lot of stuff in Cuba that really connected to the same kinds of things that I was seeing in the Klamath Mountains. And arc sedimentation. So when the sediment erodes off of those volcanoes and that sediment washes out into the sea, you end up with layers of sand and silt and clay that form these sequences called turbidites. And so there's one from the Klamath Mountains. There's one from Cuba. This one, by the way, is Whidbey Island. This one, somebody cover up Michelle's ears. This is from the national park. But this is a turbidite from about, I don't know, let's see, that section there is probably about 25 million years ago. But this is basically as subduction's taking place, things are getting scraped up on the edge of the continent. So here's arc sedimentation into the ocean basin, but from our coastline. Oh, and this one, by the way, from Whidbey Island, yeah, I tried to pick up a bigger one, but I tried to put it in a double bag, Safeway grocery bag. Yeah, it just fell through the bottom, scraped the whole entire front off my leg. One of the other geologists is standing there going, "Here, why don't you take this one home?" Another really exciting thing for a geologist, when that meteorite hit. Where did the meteorite hit? The one that killed the dinosaurs. Well, there was also a bunch of basalt erupting somewhere in the world at the same time in India, but they added together and then wiped out the dinosaurs.
Yucatan Peninsula.
The Yucatan Peninsula.
Chicxulub.
Which is right by where Cuba was. Cuba was even closer when that meteorite hit. So when it smashed into the limestones in the Caribbean at that time, which wasn't called the Caribbean at that time, well, dinosaurs, they didn't know how to name stuff. So basically, it smashes in, it throws all this stuff in the air, including all these tektites that come raining down onto the carbonate shelf. And that sand right there, which, I guess it's in that bag over there. If somebody wants to touch the sand that has bits of, I don't know if I have exact bits. The Japanese took home tons of the stuff and sorted through it and actually found tektites and other bits related to the meteorite hit. But that sand is a deposit from the meteorite, and I have a chunk of that. I also have that little sequence of rocks there. The biggest rock has big pieces in it because it smashed down, and when you drop a bunch of sediment through water, it sorts by size. So the big pieces end up on the bottom, and the smaller pieces end up on top, and then the very top clay stuff is the one with the iridium anomaly in it, which is how they found it in the first place, because it's not supposed to have iridium, except that when you smash up a meteorite and throw it into the air, you end up with iridium all over the place. So for a scientist, a geologist, being at the spot, that is the boundary. The rocks below there, now granted those were in the ocean, so the dinosaurs weren't like hanging out in them or anything. But those were depositing the same time the dinosaurs were still running around. Then they went extinct, and that sand deposited. So this is this is deposited in seconds, right? Because the meteorite hits and this stuff all comes raining down. So yeah, that was worth going to Cuba for all by itself. Fossils, of course. Remember, I sent away for fossils at 10, so yeah, I like fossils. Fossils are cool because they tell us how the Earth was formed and what was going on and what the climate was like in the past and all that other good stuff. I was kind of impressed with the public education in geology, so that right there was a whole series of pamphlets on, this is for the general public, on landslides. They had ones on earthquakes, so they had a whole series of little pamphlets for the general public. Dinosaur, obviously a fake dinosaur, but dinosaur museum that was being directed by the guy who was our fearless leader. So queremos que sean como el Che, and then Fidel just stuck his name on there because, he's Fidel. But the idea is that you should be like Che Guevara. I can't say his last name. But anyway, the idea was that he basically said you should keep learning and never stop learning, and that's why you need to be like Che. And so this is like grade school kids playing, and then our fearless leader there, the older one. And then there's the three are actually geology students at the university in one of the towns that we visited. So they were invited to come, and they were so excited because this guy's name, he's like a hero to them in the geology world. And they were so excited that they actually got to meet him and talk to him. They were like really happy. And the young man on the end is from Vietnam, because Vietnam's communist and Cuba's communist, and so they share. And we don't have limestones around here, so I thought the limestones were really cool, and going through the limestone caves and all that limestone stuff. We're going faster now. Cuban culture, music, right? Music wasn't really my thing, but we did go to the Buena Vista Social Club. Oh, yay. Yeah, so we actually got to go to the Buena Vista Social Club. Some of these older guys here have been around since the beginning. Religion, the Pope had just visited the year before, so they had signs all over about the Pope, and again, music everywhere. Everywhere we went, there was music. You couldn't go to Cuba unless it was a cultural tour, and they didn't count geology as culture, so we could only spend half the day doing geology. We had to do the other half the day had to be cultural things. We visited a tobacco farm. They were very proud of the fact that they were not using tractors because the soils are very delicate, and to keep them from getting all smashed down and stuff, that basically they were doing a lot more hand stuff. And yes, there are a lot of old cars, and I took that picture. I couldn't believe it was no modern cars except for the buses carrying the tourists around. Now this should not surprise you. Books. Yeah, my mom always said that, if I had my nose in a book, the house could burn down and I would never notice. Yeah, well, everybody else disappeared to the restaurant we were eating lunch, and I was looking at the books and I didn't notice. So next thing I know, I'm all by myself, everybody else is gone, I don't know where they went, I start wandering the streets, I didn't really go very far, maybe a block this way and a block that way. Finally, somebody came out of the restaurant looking for me and flagged me down and said, hey, we're over here. Yeah, well, this is still happening. Just last month, I didn't tell Dave this yet. Just last month, I was flying up to Alaska to, visit my daughter and the cute little grandbaby. And, I got there plenty early, so I was grading discussions on this, this is theirs, but on the one that the school gave me. I'm grading discussions, and I'm trying to read this discussion, and some man behind me is talking really loud, and, you'd think I'd be used to that kind of stuff, because we're all loud, right? Yeah. But I have trouble hearing if there's other noises going on.
And so I sat where, I mean, the thing was right next to me, right? Where the people, the little agent people and all that stuff. And normally I sit, you know, like facing everybody, but I was kind of facing the window, but I was parallel with the thing, right? I never heard any announcements, and finally I thought, God, there's nobody seems to be around, and it's kind of quiet. And I turned around, and nobody was there. Like, all the people were gone. So I went up to the desk, and I said, did the plane board? And I'm looking at the sign, and all the green lights are checked, and they're going, they've been looking for you. They'd already shut the door. Somebody had to come and unlock the door so that I could go down the thing to get on the plane. Yeah, so there is a thing about, yes, if you're reading, you may not hear things that are going on around you. Yeah. And the money's here just because they actually have two sets of money. So they have the money that the tourists use, and if you work in the tourist industry, like you drive a cab or whatever, you can get some of that money. Or they have the money that the regular Cubans get. So basically a doctor would make, you know, like $10 a month. But then you go spend the money in the special stores that are only for the Cubans, right? If you're a tourist, you can't buy anything in those stores. Except that one of our guys, he went and bought an ice cream cone, and he gave him change in Cuban money, because you're not even supposed to have the Cuban money at all. So I managed to get, you know, some dollars from him, and then we went into a Cuban store and bought some books with the Cuban money, not the tourist Cuban money. Books, yeah. So just so you know, it never stops. We may have mapped the surface, but we're still trying to figure out what's going on underneath, and things just get more confusing. The more data you collect, the more confusing it gets. So just keep that all you administrators who think if we collect more data, we're going to figure out how to do the scheduling and all that stuff. No, the more data you get, the more confusing it's going to get. So you get all this stuff down here. What does that mean? So they've come up with some ideas. And this is like Cuba over here, and it's kind of like, well, subduction was going this way, and subduction is going this way. Remember, on both sides of the Caribbean, subduction is going like this right now. Well, somebody suggested that, you know, all this time we've been saying subduction's going, you know, like North America's coming this way and subduction's coming this way. Well, somebody said, well, based on this ribbony-looking stuff you see underneath, Dave said it was intestines, but I tend to think of it as ribbon candy, that the subduction was, instead of going this way the whole time, it was really going this way, like they're showing in that picture up there at the top, and then some point, the volcanoes basically smashed onto the edge of the continent during the Jurassic, well, a little later, because those are, well, it was Jurassic volcanoes and stuff. And then it started coming the other way. I don't know, if you look at the rocks at the surface, so again, you gotta go look at the evidence of the rocks. Does that really make sense? You can draw a lovely picture based on, you know, the remote data, but I got a lot more to learn before we figure that one out. So it never ends. How did the mountains get there? Why are they there the way they are? Who knows? So this will go faster because this is just basically pretty pictures. The adventure continues because not only can you go to transform boundaries and subduction zones, which are, you know, convergent, you can also go to divergent boundaries, it turns out. You go stand on the mid-Atlantic ridge if you go to Iceland. So that's Iceland over there. The tanny parts are where it's actually literally spreading apart. These rocks over here, part of North America. These rocks over here, part of Europe. This is literally going to pull apart, and that is the spreading zone in the middle of the ocean. They're going to end up on opposite sides. But they're all the same, right? Because they all flowed out at the same time. They're just pulling and stretching apart. Now, if you're in a place that's happening, you get all kinds of other cool stuff. So the word geyser actually comes from Iceland, and the geyser, there was an earthquake. Geyser actually stopped geysering, but this is right next to, I think this was Stroker or something. But this is right next to geyser, the first one called geyser. But anyway, so we went to geysers, of course, geothermal plants, because you get all kinds of great geothermal energy. And so Dave had gone, my husband had gone to some conference, and I'd been carrying that bag around, which actually says geothermal on it. So we sat on the pipe and, you know, got the geothermal bag sitting at the geothermal plant. And, you know, it's amazing what they can grow with the heat from the geothermal, right? So all these hot houses and stuff. So, I mean, that's, you know, they're growing grapes, they're growing all kinds of stuff. Camping. So we basically camped our way all the way around the island. Well, I would have, except that it was too big and heavy to take on the plane, so I had to buy this little nasty mini thing that's all, you know. The flannel and canvas are actually the best way to go. And I still use it if I don't have to take it on a plane.
But anyway, yeah, so we camped. We took our sleeping bags with us. And so I love waterfalls, so we hiked up there. And from the top up there, if you hike down far enough, you can actually see the peak of the volcano that erupted and basically shut down all the airports in Europe. So this was a picture that we picked. We didn't get this picture because it wasn't erupting while we were there, but that's what it looked like. So you have, the towns and the farms and stuff, and this thing's going off in the background. So I because I was living in Portland, working for the coal company when St. Helens went off, and so I would ride my bike over the Portland Hills to drop down into Portland, and you'd come across the hills and you'd see this going off in the background, and I kept looking at it going, so where are the dinosaurs, right? Every diorama you ever saw has volcanoes going in the background and dinosaurs in the foreground. And part of what drove us to Iceland was my daughter Rachel. They were going to stop in Iceland on their way home from Europe because she'd spent a year working in a university, and by the way, she got a job at Linfield College. She's going to be a professor. That means 1 grandbaby, no longer in North Carolina, coming here. But she was 8 months pregnant, and I wasn't letting an 8-month pregnant woman drive around to remote areas of an island without at least 2 people there that had at least been in a hospital room where babies had been born. Just in case. And we didn't realize it at the time, but we figured it out later that there is a project in Iceland to actually drill all the way to the mantle, and several people have tried it and never made it. There's been several projects. Well, they're trying to do it, and that is the drill rig. So we actually got a picture of the drill rig. We were standing right, not obviously there's a fence around it, you can't go walk to it, but we were actually in the spot where they were doing that. And then just, pretty pictures. So horses running past the lighthouse. Who wouldn't want to have that picture? With a fjord, but not the dramatic Norway type stuff, but it still counts as a fjord because it's glacially carved and it's full of seawater. But now, granted, my son-in-law caught that picture. So here's the island we didn't visit because I was reading Robert Ludlum. Once I read one, I wanted to read all of them, and it took me too long to do my thesis, and Chevron basically said, if you don't show up in June, you don't have a job. Well, it turned out that when we saved up all that money to go to graduate school, my husband wanted to hike across Baffin Island. And I said, well, if we have money left over, sure, we'll spend it on hiking across Baffin Island. Well, it turned out we had pretty much all the money left over, except for the $1,000 for the encyclopedias. But Chevron wants me to come to work, so now I don't have time to hike across the island. And we got to Denver, and I went, oh my God, this is like a 20% housing down payment. We bought a house, we didn't go to Baffin Island. He's never let me forget it. So finally, about 5-6 years ago, I actually made reservations to hike across, and if you'll notice here, right, here's us, there's Iceland, and there's Baffin Island in between. You fly right across it. So I kind of noticed this on the way over. Well, first the 5-year thing. I made the reservations. We were going to hike across Baffin Island. You had to wade through, I don't know, like 15 ice-cold streams and carry 40 pounds on your back and all this kind of stuff. But then Becky called up and said she was getting engaged and she wanted us to go to Alaska to meet his parents. So I canceled the trip to Baffin Island. I only made the trip to Baffin Island because they shut him up, but because he just reminded me of it constantly, and now, unfortunately, who knows? So we were flying over, and so on the way back, normally I take the window seat because I just love to look out the window, and he usually likes to be closer to the aisle so he can get up and walk around. Well, I said, dear, we're going to fly over Baffin Island. It was a beautiful day, clear skies. I said, we're going to Baffin Island. We're going to be right over Baffin Island. Dave took the picture out the window, so there's evidence that we've at least been over Baffin Island. He says it doesn't count. So here's the growth thing. It's now 5 years later. Are we too old to hike and carry a pack and wade all those streams?
How old was Dad?
Dad was 65 when I made him, spend 2 months in the woods carrying rocks. That and Iceland. And actually, Dave says, wasn't it that point right there? Jules Verne and the the center of the earth, whatever
Journey
the journey to the center of the earth. That's where he entered to get to the journey to the center of the earth. That was the location. Well, it's in a book, but that was the location in the book that he was going to go. So, anyway, that's it.
Bill. Thank you, everyone. That was the force of nature. That's why we love Beth. So.